Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. This is the Innovator, the Imitator, and the Idiot. I'm Kyle Wong with Moxie, Colorado.
I'm Corey Martin with Bank of England Mortgage here in Denver, Colorado.
And today we have a guest joining us. This is Chris Bello. He is also out of the greater Denver area in Colorado. And man, he's got quite a story to share with us. So take it away. Give us a little spiel from you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. I always love chatting with other people, especially podcasters. It's just interesting being on the other side of the mic as I personally interview many guests as well. Like we were talking about before we hit record, I've got over 400 podcast episodes of my own. I've been podcasting for years, although the vehicle I focused on for monetizing has changed slightly since then. I guess to take it way back, let's like start at the way back, right? I got my college degree. I worked in oil and gas. I went down that corporate ladder of just seeing, okay, there's vice presidents, there's supply chain directors. I don't know if I want to be in their shoes in 20 years. And so that kind of made me just stop in my tracks. And I realized like, okay, I got a college degree. I got a great internship. I got this job that I thought was my dream, but I'm just not passionate or excited about it. And I kind of had that whole, midlife crisis at 22, probably. Like, what do I do? I just picked something. I studied this degree. I got, good grades, and I'm in this role that I can't imagine myself doing this every single day, driving 1 hour each way in Houston traffic to sit in an office that I don't want to be at. Right. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And that's kind of the origin story of how I personally got into real estate. I fell on my face. I tried a couple things. I tried to sell stuff from garage sales. I tried to invent a product with a friend. So there were some failures before I landed in real estate. But here I am. And as you know, Kyle, we've talked about this before. I'm licensed in Texas and in Colorado. I've got closings virtually on properties I've never been to. And I've developed a bunch of skills on how to market, automate, and delegate in order to make money without having to play by someone else's rules. I mean, obviously I got to follow the Texas Real Estate Commission's rules and
Sure, sure.
various associations, but I've developed a few skills here and there that have enabled me to take more control of my life and do calls like this from my home office, which is really cool. So hopefully that
Yeah.
wasn't too long of an intro, but feel free to dive in as much as you like.
No, that's great. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm
Yeah.
super excited to touch on all of it. Just because today we're going to be going through, I mean, like who you are, what's your background, extrapolate a little bit more out of that, and then talk about your professional career in real estate, right? So, like, after getting into real estate, what does that look like for you? What have you tried? Where have you been? What have you done? And just go through all of that. So, I guess to summarize, first of all, my story was a little bit similar to that, getting into real estate, because I was, going to school for mechanical engineering, loved cars, always have, always will, and just realized like I don't really love this. Like the ultimate goal, the end goal for me, that wasn't really what I wanted when I thought
Yeah.
about it. And so when I sat down, I was like, okay, how can I take the skills and all the things that I've learned and translate that to really serving my community better, and doing something that is a lot more fulfilling. And so having gotten into real estate, I'm sure you feel the same way, kind of opens the doors to the possibilities, right? Because it's not just a job, right? People can treat it as a job, but it is truly a business and it's so multifaceted. And so let's talk about kind of your beginnings, right? Your origin story. So you got into real estate. Now what?
Yeah. So, I mean, even then, just figuring out what you want to be when you grow up. I think I saw some of you, your heads nodding and you guys can relate. And I didn't know that part of your story, Kyle, but now I do. It's just a lot of people listening right now can probably relate to going through the day to day, not really being sure what they even want to do. How often do we really even stop to think, like, what do I actually want with my life? And am I doing things that I enjoy doing? I never did that. Right. So, I had the sunk cost fallacy of thinking I studied supply chain management. I got a supply chain job. Like changing right now would be stupid. I have years into this. Why would I change into real estate? I know nothing about real estate. I own no properties. That was all going through my mind at the time. So just wanted to remind everyone out there that it's never too late to change. You don't have to feel like you wasted your degree or you're in the wrong profession. So you have to just stay there. If you're not happy, you can make a change. So I wanted to start off with that. And so with that in mind,
100%.
that's where I started listening to podcasts like many of us have, Bigger Pockets. And I heard a wholesaling company, which is off-market transactions. You know, a wholesaler, for those not familiar, goes to often motivated sellers, finds properties that need work, and they flip those to their investor clients, who then buy those properties as rental properties, or they renovate them to flip them on the market. And so I heard that podcast. The guy was based in Houston. He went to my university, and that's where my real estate journey started. I reached out and I said, hey, I'm pretty entrepreneurial, but I haven't really figured out how to make money on my own. I watched a couple of YouTube videos. I want to do this stuff. I went to the same school as you, so I built rapport that way. And that's where I got my start at a house buying company in Houston. And that was in 2018.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I joined a company, shout out. They're called Senna House Buyers. Matt Trenchard out there runs a really clean operation. They do it ethically. They tell the sellers what's going on. They're not doing any of this fly by night stuff of like, hey, we're buying the property, but we're not really.
Sure.
They explain everything. And so that really drew me to them, because I know there's a lot of sketchy players in that industry sometimes, where they're locking up deals that they never intend to close. And there's some white lies that are told, to say the least. So that's where I got my journey started. I called sellers. I talked to divorced people that hated each other and they needed to sell this property. And as I continued to just interface and interact with different clients, people started to tell me like, dude, you'd make a great realtor. You have a great personality. You know, you love talking to people. That's like the realtor, the perfect realtor formula. You got to love talking to people. And that's where I ended up getting my license. So I've got this investor background, but also this real estate license, retail side experience. And personally, I consider myself to be more of like a marketer, more so than just like a realtor or a wholesaler. And we can dive into that if you like as well. But I think personally, we all have our own personal brands, and that's far more important than like the number of deals you're doing, or, you know, which brokerage you hang your license at. I mean, you're a person, I'm a person. We all have our own brand, whether we know it or not. If I look at your social media, there's a brand image that is being displayed. And are you proud of that brand? Would that make me want to do business with you if we weren't talking today? Right. Yeah. So those are all things that I've thought through. But I'm happy if you guys got any questions. Corey, I see you nodding over there.
Yeah,
like, feel free to jump in, man.
We've gone through like 4 or 5 of them, you know, so we're just going to jump back into, you know, jump back in the story. But I was interested, you know, when you're talking about, so obviously you got into the real estate industry on the wholesale side, on the investor side, and then you transition to getting your license, still doing both. What kind of business have you built for yourself as an agent? Are you still working more on the investor side, or is it just kind of like a come one, come all? You're serving everybody.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know I follow a lot of mentors. I'm sure both of you as well listen to podcasts, and there's books like The One Thing and Essentialism, and Hormozi's always like, why are you doing 15 different things? You should be doing one thing. That's the entrepreneurial curse sometimes, is just being able to say no. So I know I can feel that I've still said yes to too many things. I'm still super scattered. Like, I have this podcast on business and marketing, but I also kind of do some of this and some of that. So I know that's been a weakness of mine. But to answer your question, I think there's some validity to it within the real estate space. Another guy that I follow, Trevor Mock, is the CEO of Carrot.com. If you guys are familiar, it's a resource to provide SEO-friendly websites for investors and real estate agents. And he talks a lot about the hybrid agent, that you're losing opportunities. If you're the one-size-fits-all person, if you're just a wholesaler and you don't have the ability to list it, like you're a one-trick pony. If you can't serve that seller, then you're not getting that opportunity. But if you're a hybrid agent, if you're like, hey, I can get you a cash offer, we can do this off market, we can wholesale this. Or if you're looking to get the most at the top of the market, you're willing to wait, you're willing to put 20K in repairs into it, I can help you list it. Right. So you can play both angles, or you can really look at it from the marketer perspective, and you can just farm out leads to various people in your network. If you've got wholesaling friends, cool, send them the lead. Just make sure they cut you in on the wholesale fee when that closes. And same thing with retail side. Maybe you don't necessarily want to work the leads, you don't want to list it. So personally, that's where I've been playing more lately, is just farming out deals and checking in on the status and making sure that I'm cut in on the back end for kind of just the lead generation portion of it.
Yeah.
So again, I kind of look at myself more as a marketer and a lead generator, more so than being the Denver Metro top realtor. Like, I don't really want that
Sure.
award. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh no, that makes total sense, and it's great to think about it and where the industry is going.
Yeah.
I got started in this industry actually at Trulia. I can still see the office
That's cool.
not too far from where I'm at.
He's got a great view from his office.
Looks nice. Beautiful day.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Really, it's a
I haven't been outside yet
day.
today.
Oh man, I know the feeling, but go ahead, get your vitamin D. Get your vitamin D, right?
After this call.
But the lead generation part of this is so crucial to our business, right? And I started trying to help agents being able to create to generate leads, and eventually got onto the other side of this where I'm generating my own leads. But it's so interesting because, man, if you are good at that, if you're just good at generating leads, you don't always have to have the best skill set on the other side, but you'll always have a full pipeline. And so, you can almost stumble your way to having a good year just by that one skill set which is just being able to market yourself and lead generate.
Yeah, which is why I think your skill set is super duper valuable, because I think that's the biggest issue for most agents is going back a little bit, they treat it like a job. And so they sit down, they get their pad ready, they do their CE credits and all that stuff. And then they're like, okay, where do I find people trying to buy or sell a house? You know what I mean? That's kind of like square one, right? And so going back, I just find it super interesting because most people get into real estate. Admittedly, it's kind of like, I hate to say this because I know this isn't true for everybody, but admittedly, a lot of people are just like, well, nothing else worked out. Let's try something that I know some people are successful in, right? And that's not necessarily a bad reason to get in, but it's not a good reason that's going to sustain your business, right? Just trying to figure things out in a new industry is never a sustainable business plan. So I find it very interesting that you actually got your background in real estate, not only in those types of property acquisitions through that company, but also in the investor side, right? Because most people step into the industry by getting their license and then starting with perhaps rentals or lower dollar residential sales. And then they kind of work their way up, if you will, to investor clients and bigger companies and stuff like that. So I think that's really interesting. Also, the fact that you mentioned that now it's not even really about the sales, it's kind of the marketing and sort of the passive aspect, right? You and I both know there's no such thing as real passive business, right? There's always work that goes into it one way or another. But it's funny because I love referral business. I think it is an amazing business model. I remember, when I first started out, I personally just started making calls because I was like, you know what? I can't do much. I don't know as much as these other people who've been in the business for 20 years, but I know how to make a phone call. And I know that I'm just trying to get some business. So I would go through the expired list in the MLS, right? And so I would go through and I set the filter to 2.5 million and above. And one of these calls, I got a hold of the seller and she's like, yeah, I mean, I'm out of town. I
love that, by the way. Most agents would be like, let me stick to 200K. I'm thinking Houston prices, but like you just filtered with the top level.
Well, I'm like, look, man, like 2.5 million or 200,000. It's the same phone call. It's the same deal, right? I'm doing the same thing. But here's the thing. I knew on my end, I wasn't going to tell them this. I knew that I didn't know how to market, right? I didn't have all the marketing dollars behind it. So my plan was always either to refer it out if it was really out of my wheelhouse or co-list it with somebody that did have that dollar behind it and experience. And so that's exactly what I did. Got a listing, a huge listing up in the mountains, referred that out. And I was like, wait, I just made 2 phone calls, one to the client, one to the other agent. And I'm going to get a check cut for about 20 grand whenever this closes. Right. And again, that is whenever it closes. It's not like I just I get a bunch of money in my bank account. But I was like, man, referral business is a really powerful thing because if you are effective, right, it's not one of those things. Sure, it's a numbers game, but it's all about that conversion, right? Like you had mentioned earlier, you got to have that pipeline, but you got to have that conversion some way or another. And so making those calls and getting that business done, just connecting the two people, you could get paid off of that. So I guess now, what does your current business look like in terms of, you said you marketed. I know that you have a lot of automation and a lot of cool processes going on. In fact, just so you guys know, I've actually called him for advice on automation and all of his cool email newsletters. So tell me a little bit about that. What does your business look like now?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking. And I guess that's been some of the stuff that I've struggled with recently, is just like, okay, I've got some skills. I've learned some things. I've been in the skill stacking stage, as one of my friends refers to it as. I can make sales. I can do marketing. I can build funnels. I know how to build websites on WordPress. But as I was learning all those things, I didn't know. I sucked. My emails didn't make sense. People unsubscribed. So as you continue to skill stack, you get better and better at all of these different things. And you can kind of see, what do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? Where do I want to spend more of my time? And so I've kind of found myself as like, all right, I'm this realtor wholesaler guy who can generate leads, who's doing some deals, who's getting referral business and checks and stuff like that. But what's my bigger brand? What's my image? What's that thing that I want to focus on? And, I look up to like Alex Hormozy, for example, and acquisition.com. So I'm thinking, like, what is my acquisition.com type thing? I want to create a brand for myself. I want to do all of those things. But what I'm finding is that a lot of people, they know to come to me, such as yourself. They reach out for automation help, for systems help, email marketing, all of those different types of things. And a lot of people, when you become a realtor or a loan officer, for example, you're drowning in just knowledge that you need to learn. You don't know anything, right? So you're taking classes, you got licensed, you got to update some stuff for your CE credits, for example, and you also have to try to get business in the meantime. It's a lot. And so a lot of people kind of struggle there, where they just don't know where to begin. And they're in 6 classes a week instead of actually lead generating. And that's where I've been you're just learning. It's like, man, get out there and knock on doors, call people like you were doing, Kyle. Call those $2 million listings, and let's talk to some people who want to sell. Because what most people don't realize is it doesn't mean anything until you have someone who wants to work with you. None of what you've learned matters at all. You have to execute. Right. And so I've been leaning into more of that lately, is just talking to realtors of how can I help you with your systems, your email automations. We can set up some triggers where a lead schedules a time on your calendar with Calendly that adds to your email marketing, which fires off an automated email sequence with more calls to action, where it's selling without you having to actively sell. So that's been what my main focus has been, in full transparency, is like, all right, I'm good at systems. Most agents are not. How do I offer that to them to assist them with their automation so that they can have a better business, and I can help them with this thing that I've gotten really good at, but just haven't really packaged quite professionally yet. So that's kind of the piece that I'm working to connect, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Chris, one thing you had mentioned earlier,
I'm like speaking brand Corey's identity. Language.
Yeah.
Yes, you really are. You really are. I'm sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
No, you're good. Just something you said earlier, like you just have so many good nuggets I want to like pull apart and make sure people like really get. So I want to reiterate it. But brand identity is so important, right? Like you mentioned, I was kind of this realtor guy, but I'm kind of this marketing guy. And it's like your identity as a brand is so, so important, because from who you are stems what you do. And from that stems how you do it. You know what I mean? So going through that again, I guess, you finding out who you want to be and what your brand is supposed to look like, I'm sure that helped you determine, how do I want my websites to look? How do I want to interact with people, right? How do I want to set things up in a way that actually builds that brand that I say that I am? And I thought that was super interesting, because you also had mentioned that a lot of agents aren't super good at systems and processes, and a lot of loan officers. And you're right. That's because usually what happens, we hop from a normal job and we just say, okay, I'm sitting here from 9 to 5. Tell me what I need to do. Right. And that's not how it works at all. If you don't have, we always say, if you don't have an assistant, you are that assistant. But guess what? If you don't have a manager, you are your manager. If you don't have a salesperson, you are that salesperson. And, like you were saying, going door to door and getting that firsthand experience is essential, because until you have that knowledge and you put it into place, it means nothing, right? Because I can be the smartest guy in the world, but until I actually prove it and I use it and I do something with it, it doesn't matter, because nobody knows and it's not going to help anybody. And I'm not saying that formal education or like all the things that you learn when you get licensed is not important. But I'm sure anybody that has ever been in the real estate profession ever knows that doing your first deal probably taught you a lot more than actually getting your license.
100%. I mean, the joke that I always tell people is like, you're not going to use anything you study for in the real estate exam. Have you ever needed to know how many acres or how many square feet are in an acre?
Right.
No,
period.
that's the joke I see all the time. Right. And I think it's a Tony Robbins quote that says, knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. You have to actually apply it and execute, because the person who doesn't know that much about a deal, but does the deal, essentially has more experience than the person who has all the credentials, but hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
It's so true, because that experience that you get out there being in the field is really what makes you and gives you the confidence to go out and get more business and gather more leads. I want to jump back though. Chris, you talked a lot about like, some of the skills that you've developed are in just creating systems. And I am a big believer of systems and habits. That's something that Kyle and I have talked a lot about. I read Atomic Habits, and that book just like, that's my new Bible, right? That's the New Testament to me. And I love this quote in there: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fail to the level of your systems and your habits, right? So I want to ask, what's your most important system that you currently use, or that your most important system that you created?
That's a great question. So, plug, but I get this question a lot. So I created a training. I have a full video on it, 45-minute training of my exact systems, how I close deals out of state, because I guess I kept having the conversation. I did several live webinars. I answered many of the questions, and then I was like, systems, let me make an evergreen, like automated webinar so people can watch this while we're talking. There could be a dude in Bangladesh, like watching my webinar right now and learning exactly what works for me, at least in the US. I'm not sure if it works very well in Bangladesh, but chrisbello.com/agents is the link if anyone's interested in checking that out. But my favorite tool so far has been Calendly for scheduling. I know phone calls are important. I know that they work when you're calling through lists and you're doing, calling expireds or calling potentially motivated sellers. But personally, having people schedule time on my calendar has been powerful, because if you and I are talking here on this interview and I'm getting 5 missed calls and someone calls me 10 times, even if it's an emergency, I'm not going to get back to them until after our call. But if they find me online, they find their, through my systems, my emails, it says, hey, book a time with me here. They can literally book a time on my calendar today. There's ways to find out how to do that if they really want to get a hold of me. And it's going to send them an email and me an email along with the Zoom link, so that I capture their information, first name, last name, email, what they want to talk about. And it's actually locked in on my calendar, and there's automated text reminders and email reminders. So it's no more of that, hey, does Wednesday work? Does Thursday work? Does a phone call work? You want to meet for coffee? I'm like, dude, pick the Calendly meeting and it's going to tell you everything. I'm not going to have to remind you. You're not going to forget unless you really don't check anything. Does that kind of make sense? So Calendly, hands down, my number one tool.
So it sounds like Calendly obviously is the number one tool. You just said that, but it's not. It's because of how it organizes you and how it allows you to be very specific and intentional with your time. And as an entrepreneur, your time is the most important and most valuable thing that you have.
Exactly. And just being proactive versus reactive. A lot of the books, I mean, I'm sure we've read many similar ones. Atomic Habits was amazing. I personally don't like the idea of just answering every single phone call all the time and interrupting whatever I'm working on, because there's a cost to that, right? Task switching. And again, I kind of threw it in there earlier. I studied supply chain, but in the manufacturing sense, let's say you're making widget A, and widget A requires a 1-hour setup time. It takes a whole hour before you can start making widget A. And then widget B takes 2 hours to set up the machines to start making that. So every time you're switching, I think for a 15-minute phone call, it actually takes you like another 30 minutes or something. I forget the exact numbers, to remember what were you doing, get back in that flow. So answering unknown phone calls or random phone calls, that's constantly throwing you off because you're task switching and there's a cost associated to that mentally with your bandwidth. But for a Calendly type thing where it's like, hey, you can't book me within 4 hours, I'm going to spend the rest of my next hour or two on what I'm working on. And now I know that that other appointment is going to be on my calendar later in the day. And even for like podcasts, I only allow podcast bookings on Tuesdays. So there's different rules that you can put in place depending on what your schedule looks like or your ideal version of what you want to do. You don't want to have calls on Friday, block Friday off, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
right.
so glad you mentioned that, because you're so right. Like, we know, just going through processes as it is, that things take time, and mentally it's the exact same way, right? I can't be going through something very creative and then go straight to like a hardcore workout and then go straight to like monotonous tasks in my day job. You know what I mean?
Right,
they're very different things that require very different mental energy. And that's super interesting, because I always have people say like, well, how do you do so much? Like, it always looks like your calendar's so booked. Like, you must be really busy and therefore stressed. And I'm like, I am busy. I'm not stressed. And here's why: because I'm doing the exact same amount of things, but I'm doing it with less stress. Could I technically do more with the way I organize stuff? Yeah, absolutely I could. But I like having the same productivity with a lower stress, because when I do something like this, it's exactly like you'd mentioned. I'm not being interrupted. I'm not worrying about answering calls. I'm not worrying about answering emails, because I have things in process to where when I'm not available, things are still being taken care of within reason, right? And when I'm on this podcast, I'm not thinking, shoot, man, am I missing out on a deal because I'm missing a phone call right now? Like, there are fail safes and there are people for that. And it's just a better way to live life. And truly, it's an essential way to live life if you're going to be running a business, I think.
Yeah. And if you don't have systems, I love that quote that you mentioned from Atomic Habits, Corey. That was it. You fall to the level of your systems. If you don't have systems, you're the person who's answering every phone call. You're late to every appointment. You have a Zoom call scheduled with me and you're doing it from a showing because you have a buyer that you're showing 5 houses to because you didn't use a digital calendar and you didn't adequately appropriate, enough time. That happens all the time. Every time I got a call the realtor, it's like 10 minutes in, they're late. Sorry, I'm in a showing. They're Zoom calling me to apologize. And I'm just like, man, I got someone else doing my showing right now. Someone else is doing my open house. It's called leverage. You don't have to wear all the hats all the time. That's the biggest point that I try to drive home, because people think that they have to do everything on their own, and you don't. You can have systems. You can have team members. Like Kyle, I'm sure you've got really good systems and teams, team processes dialed in where other people are doing that. You've got a transaction coordinator. You're not like, oh my gosh, I need to write this contract right now for this property. Someone else does that for you.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. In fact, we were just having a meeting with our video production manager last night for this podcast about getting shorts put together for it, right? Because you and I both know short form, long form can go together really well if done right. And we kind of see it as an advertisement. And just to brag on the team for a second, you're absolutely right. I got tired of having to edit all my own stuff. I got tired of having to stay up till 3 working on a website, or having to do manual data entry, knowing full well, like, there are softwares and CRMs that are literally made for this. Like, why do I have to go through like all my text on my phone and be like, hey, that potential buyer from like 6 months ago, where are you at now? Like, I should have something to automate that process and do that, right? Another big thing when it comes to real estate, or really any industry actually, is nurturing your leads, right? The biggest problem that people say as the consumer in real estate, they say is communication, right? I didn't hear enough. I didn't know enough. I didn't feel like they were being honest or transparent with me. But I also think that that translates to teams, because how often have you heard, not as commonly as the consumer, but how often have you heard, like, I don't really believe in the team model because I feel like I'm being handed off, right?
Right.
The team model is a more efficient system, but you have to do better with it, right? Because if I hand you off to an assistant and they're asking you the exact same questions that I just asked you, that's pointless. What's the point of having a TC or an assistant or a showing agent, right? I have people in place to do their tasks. They do it very, very well. We uphold them to a high level of service and a high standard. And then they go on to somebody else that does a different task with the same level of service. That's the point of having an ISA and an assistant that nurtures leads, so that by the time they get to us, they're ready to go. We're showing houses. And guess what? If I'm unavailable, if I'm doing something like this, I have somebody else showing houses, because that's sort of I'm not a menial task, but that's something that doesn't require my personal time and attention. But you know what does? Writing contracts, having those buyer consultations, and going to closings.
Exactly. And one podcast I listened to, I think it referred to it as the $10 an hour tasks. And it was like, stop doing all the $10 an hour tasks. I mean, it's not to downplay that or say it's a menial job that some other peasants is going to do. Like, we're not trying to say that, but you need to focus on the $1,000 an hour tasks, the $10,000 an hour tasks. And that's what, as you level up and you get higher and higher level, you just deal with bigger problems that have more zeros behind it. And you can earn far more by achieving leverage, right? You earn higher dollars per hour in less time, because a lot of those $10 an hour tasks you're no longer doing.
Yeah. To like really simplify that and put that into like one sentence, I always just say, what's the job that only I can do, right? There are things that other people can do, but what can I be doing right now? Sorry, Corey.
No, go. One of the other things I was just going to say is, I think it's also, so I'm big on leadership. Big on, like, reaching back and helping people out. Yeah. And I think what a great opportunity to reach back and to help somebody out by giving them those $10 an hour tasks, right? I'm not talking about someone that's overqualified for them. I'm talking about somebody who may be underqualified for it. Maybe an opportunity to give somebody, man, this person, I look at it as a mentoring opportunity. And granted, it's going to take more time. Because you've got to teach this person, this underskilled person, you've got to develop those skills. But what ends up happening is you've got this team member that you've got that is so committed to making sure that they give, your clients the best service possible. So I think that that's a great opportunity for leadership and for mentoring and things like that, is to when you're thinking about how to delegate, think about who you're delegating to.
Exactly.
100%.
One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning of this call, Chris, that I just think is so cool, when you were telling your story and you're like, I'm an entrepreneur now, I've built these systems and I've built these companies. I'd like to think of you as like a thought leader in the industry. But you talked about, hey, look, man, I fell flat on my face at one point in time. Like, I went to college, I did everything that I was supposed to do, and then I found that wasn't working for me, and so I pivoted. I transitioned. Shout out to the Pivot podcast. I want to know a little bit more about some of those failures, the space in between, okay, look, I'm out of oil and gas. I don't quite know what the next move is for me, but I'm just kind of trying stuff. What did you, just to make me feel better about some of the stuff that I've tried? I sold Cutco knives and Kirby vacuums at one point. So,
Oh, cool.
like...
Hey, and I was a sandwich artist at Subway, and I loved that job, and it was essential. But hey.
Well, it's funny because I joke with some friends that I've got a $40,000 paperweight for an invention idea. I literally have the 3D printed model and a prototype in my drawer. And it kind of serves as like a humbling reminder every time I get too overly ambitious. I'm like, yo, let's slow down, Chris. Remember that time you thought this was a perfect idea and you weren't going to run into any snags and you spent $40,000 on something that never really materialized. So that's one of my failures that I'm happy to share. Right out of oil and gas, around the time I was getting a little cocky, had like 80 grand or 90 grand saved up. I'm like, cool. I mean, I've never had that much money in my life saved up. I don't really use any money on anything other than some travel and like occasional fun things. Why don't we
should have bought a house?
Yeah, I should. Yeah, well, I did buy a house. I bought a house. I bought a house, paid off my car, paid off all my student loans. So I was in a good spot, right? Good oil and gas job, single dude out of college, and watched a little bit one too many episodes of Shark Tank got me, right?
I know it.
My weakness.
So, one of my friends he's a really smart dude. He still is, but he was the best man at my wedding. He had a 3D printer. He printed out stuff all the time. He'd print out cool, like trebuchet, like slingshots that were actually functional at his home office. And so we started tinkering with ideas, and I still think this is a great idea, but this just goes to show you that execution is everything. Ideas are meaningless unless you can actually fully execute. So if what you're looking at, it looks like a blender bottle type thing, like a like a container, but it's more of like a supplement organizer for those who are watching the video of this. And the cool thing is the lid opens up and you've got access to individual compartments. So let's say you've got protein powder in one, you can turn the lid, you get access to pre-workout, post-workout. It was more of a fitness supplement for all your different powders.
I definitely would have spent $20 on that.
See,
like in the right aisle in Walmart.
That dude, look, and like this is the this one actually came from the manufacturer where, you know, it's got a little handle. It actually opens, but we started to run into some issues where the web, see, it's a little bit crooked. The design, there were some design flaws. We're not engineers, but it took about $40,000 of my money, and my partner also spent about equally on his side to ship the tooling from China. So we had to get the designs made, the tooling invested in, and just to create these prototypes to see if this even works. So it was not necessarily a lean startup, but we were a little bit overly ambitious. We didn't really foresee some of the challenges that we could run into. And literally the tooling is sitting at his parents' business's warehouse somewhere in, you know, Stafford, Texas. Like it's just chilling there. And
I feel you, dog.
Dude, and it, you know, my now wife, bless her soul, she was with me. She met me. I quit my job a month later. I put in a ton of money into this. So she saw the whole thing from me being this guy who just seems like he's smart, good college education. You know, he's inventing a product. He's super cool. His friend has a Corvette. So we'd roll up to the supplier and everyone's like, this is your business?
And then the truth came out.
It got to my head a little bit. I was like, yeah, this is our business. We have an LLC. We have this invention. And literally it just was like, it's a paperweight now. I don't even look at it. It's the website's not even live anymore, you know? Financially, that's probably one of the bigger ones where I just like got overly ambitious, got in over my head and just pulled the plug because I was like, dude, I don't have any more money to write checks for this project. I quit my job for this and we weren't making any money. So that's what happened between the quitting the job and like, let me go work for a wholesaling company because I'm in debt now.
Wow. I get it. I actually started a clothing company, like a little t-shirt line. I was a college dropout at the time, and you know, had just like I had played a year of college football and was like, you know what? I don't even like I like dressing steezy. Just to kind of like give you like if I could like put a timestamp on where we were in the world, steezy was like a regular part of my vocabulary. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put together a t-shirt line, and we like bought a screen press. We were like we bought the emulsions. We were doing everything out of our apartment. Totally ruined the bathtub of this 2-bedroom apartment in Glendale. Right. But it was and same thing, we just got in over our heads, right? We were thinking that, oh, this is what running a business is. It's being able to tell girls at a party that you have a business.
Right.
Ooh. Not actually running the business.
It's not as cool as you think sometimes. No,
it's not. But you learn, right? You learn that it's about the work. You know, you learn that hey, it's about the product. It's about what you actually get up and do every day. You learn it's about your habits, not necessarily the fringe stuff, the stuff on the outside, but that other people may congratulate you for. What a lesson learned.
Exactly. And I mean, that literally, it gave me an idea. And then I tried to sell phone cases on Amazon. I bought 200 from like Alibaba, never sold any of them. Like I built the landing page. I just donated the entire box like 3 months later, but there were so many moments and tests where my wife's just like, she was my girlfriend at the time. Like, what are you doing? What are you ordering? But it didn't really matter because she knew that I was working, I was learning, I was testing. And she'd see occasional successes of like, wow, look, I just made $300 on that Buddha statue that you told me not to buy. I found like a Buddha sale and I made like $200 or $300 and flipped it within a week. But then I'd make other decisions where something would be sitting there in the closet for 4 months and then I would just give it away because no one wanted it. It wasn't selling. But that's where I started. And then you learn how to build websites and then you learn how to email market and oh, cool. Real estate. I can make money with like really no money. It's like, it's a service. you can generate income out of thin air theoretically if you just know how to market and talk to people. And I liked that model a lot more than let me spend 40 grand and see if this works. Let me tell you, getting your real estate license or, you know, doing wholesaling or becoming a loan officer, those service-based businesses, your startup costs are way lower and you get to hit the ground running with your friends, family, and your sphere. I much prefer that, but I had to start somewhere and I had to feel the pain of like seeing my money kind of catch on fire, right?
Yeah. I always say that this industry, you know, I was getting into the real estate industry, and I feel like you know, this is a very unique space in the world where there's not a lot of careers like this where you can make pretty good money and still like have people's lives much better from having worked with you. Right. You know, it's like
it's a good way to put that.
Doctor. Yeah, right. You know, like you can make good money and still like make people's lives better. It's like, you know, a doctor can do that. The principal of a school can do that. A teacher can. You have to climb the ladder quite a bit to get there.
Right.
There's not a lot of professions where you can make good money and make people's lives better. And so I can't be a doctor. I don't have a steady hand. So I had to be a mortgage loan officer.
Yeah. There's just so many lessons that you pick up along the way. And like, I mean, whether or not we're all still doing real estate in 5 or 10 years, like it doesn't matter, because what we're learning now, the marketing skills, talking to people, sales and marketing, you're going to need to know that stuff to succeed really in anything that you do, which is what we do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess for everybody listening, I just want to point this out that it's cool because Chris is a great resource as a real estate professional, not only for you as a professional, loan officers, other agents, other companies, stuff like that, but also for the consumers, right? Because that's on the podcast, we pretty much target and talk to the general, you know, like the average consumer, like the general public, because we want to make real estate like really simple. We want to keep it bottom shelf. We want people to understand like, hey, it's not like some high tier, crazy, fancy thing that I have to be super rich for. Like real estate can be as simple as, you know, whatever we explain it. So I'm happy about that. I thank you for being a resource, not only for me, but for us and for everybody that you serve as a realtor, both in Houston and in the greater Denver area. So yeah, do you want to plug your stuff? I'm sure people would get a lot of great information out of your resources.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Kyle and Corey, for having me on here. It was awesome. It's just fun telling the story. It is funny, just like constantly as part of the story, like that $40,000 mistake is a huge part of it. And I share it all the time because I'm like, yeah, it happened. There's some cool YouTube videos of what it looked like when we tried to do Kickstarter before we just decided to go all in. But I don't mind. There's a whole graveyard of ideas that every successful person has had. So I just want to leave that for anyone who's afraid of actually failing in public. Failure is the path to success. Unfortunately, you're going to have to fail. If you're not failing, you're not doing enough. But if you'd like to connect with me, I'm very active on Instagram. Chris Bello _ is my handle, but also I've got the podcast Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. And then if you go to chrisbello.com, you can kind of connect with me, find my free resources, including the agent training that I mentioned as well, which kind of talks about the whole system. But Calendly and just having scheduling is a huge part of that. So that while we're talking here, the dude in Bangladesh could be watching the video and I could have a call with him tomorrow without doing anything from pre-recorded content. So that's really powerful. And I'd like that to be the main takeaway for anyone who's like, what Chris talked about a lot, but what's that main nugget? It's doing that and just outsourcing scheduling. Yeah.
Man, that's a great point. And as you were saying that, I'm like, the $40,000 mistake, that might be the title of this podcast.
Right.
That's a good takeaway too. Don't do that.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I guess to summarize, I mean, automate what you can automate. You know, work super hard. That's what entrepreneurs do. They try a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, I'm sure you can agree with this, we're not experts in anything. Like I'm not still, I probably never will be an expert salesman. I'm never going to be an expert. Well, I don't want to say never, but I'm likely not going to be the best manager that has ever existed or the best top producing real estate agent, but I'm going to get pretty darn good. And I'm going to use the people that are really good at that. And I'm going to build a team that's the best at it because we have so many good people working together. That's why I work with Corey. That's why I love learning from you. And just thank you. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you guys. This was a really fun conversation. But yeah, any last minute questions? Anything at all?
That's it for me. I think I could talk about this all day, but I don't want to keep it
Me
going on
too. I'm like,
forever.
I gotta be respectful of your time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My only question is, who's your favorite Texas rapper? Because I love them all.
Oh man, I know it's funny. We've got a pretty good like Houston community. You know, we've got friends who know Slim Thug and like Paul Wall and
Yes.
all of that. So
Yes.
yeah, you know, like the Houston rappers, you can't go wrong with that. Well, we do have some friends that have like the rims that stick out and like
Yeah.
what do they call them? Swanging and banging, right?
Swanging and banging, man. That's the chariot. So I'm from New Orleans. I grew up on
The chariots.
on the Southern rap. Like I feel like that's a big part of like the
Yeah,
culture that I love and respect and appreciate. That's
100%.
closest to home to me. And then Houston is, they say Houston is New Orleans West, right? Like it's a bigger
Yeah.
version of New Orleans. They've got the ward system there. They've got the Creoles there. And so I love Houston. I think it's a great city and love my Houston rappers, and also love the Astros. We don't have a baseball team in New Orleans. So, you know, most of us that are baseball fans in New Orleans, we all go for the Stros.
Yeah, awesome, man. That's a great little insight too. Cause I mean, my wife was just talking about, hey, I want to go do a girls trip in New Orleans. Like I miss Bourbon Street and I miss those,
This is the guy.
those desserts and like, you know, what do they call those little, what's that place
Beignets.
called? Like, yes, beignets.
Cafe
like,
Bignon. Yeah. Cafe Bignon.
Yeah.
Oh man, dude, it just took me back. I could smell it and feel it and taste it. I'm doing 75 hard as well. You know about that, Kyle. I've been on this diet, 2 workouts a day, no desserts. So I'm gonna hit that up as soon as I'm done.
It's gonna be satisfying when
man.
you're done. Yeah. I just
What
came
a
through a
reward.
21-day fast, and Corey knows, like, oh my gosh.
It's
Oh, it was
tough,
so
man.
good on the other side.
Cafe du Monde, that's gonna be in my future very soon.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, this has been a wonderful podcast. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Kyle, or Chris. You can find us on all of our social media handles. Just remember, you know, no matter what part of the real estate industry you're in or when you're getting into the real estate industry, just remember in any market, there is always an innovator,
An imitator.
and an idiot. I'm Corey Martin with Bank of England Mortgage here in Denver, Colorado. If you have questions about personal finance, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at Corey Martin on Instagram or Facebook.
Thank you. And I'm Kyle Wong with Moxie, Colorado. Feel free to reach out. I've actually got a Calendly link below. And this is Chris Bello here. We'll be sure to have all of his information linked up below, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.